And then I spent in a twirl and I saw you, my golden girl, but you stood there as though you was on a higher level and treated my love as though it was a pebble. I took that same pebble and turned it into a boulder and carried all this weight right here on my shoulders. How could you die before you live? How could you take before you give? How could you know what you have seen if you don't know what it means? What goes on behind closed doors? Nobody know because nobody saw. They may say they know when the key go click, but they never know exactly what they miss. Like the farmer said to the little boy and the little girl, take your eye off the key, you take your eye off the world.
If I was to tell that story, I would have to go all the way to the beginning. The beginning. Well, it all started with chocolate. I love 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 chocolate like many other people, but my love for chocolate began back when I was a little kid. I was 5 years old when my parents separated and then got divorced. Me and my brother went to live with my grandparents. But shortly after we got there, my grandfather wanted us out of his house. He was retired and nothing was about to get in the way of his retirement. Not his elder son going through a nasty divorce and not his 2 grandkids. His advice to my father: find another wife and get married again and take your kids back to live with you. I don't know how much time I've left on this earth, but I don't want to have to wait until you find the right woman. Just find the wife, okay? Now, I don't know why my grandfather would sound like an Italian gangster, but I imagine that's how it went down because that's exactly what my father did. He found a woman who was willing to marry him with 2 kids. She had never been married and she couldn't wait to get out of her dad's home, it seemed. At first, my father took us a couple of times when he went to see her. She seemed nice, and she was an assistant nurse. Soon after they got married, and we came back to our home. Then one day, immediately after she moved in, I heard her arguing with my father. Me and my brother went to the hallway. I listened. And she told my father that she doesn't want to raise us. She wants her own family and kids. She doesn't love us. Then she called me in. I went inside the room and she said, "Bring me my purse." I looked at her and I said, "If you don't love us, we don't love you either." Then I brought her her purse and that's when she got really angry and kicked me out of the room and she said, "Get out of here!" My father started laughing. He found the whole thing pretty funny. I went outside to where my brother Benon was sitting in the hall, and as soon as he saw me, he said, "What did you say? What are you going to do now?" I looked at him and I said, "Nothing. I have a couple of bucks and I'm going to the store to buy some snacks. Do you want something?" My brother was shocked. From that day on, life changed for me. In fact, life changed for all of us. My father worked a lot as he had to provide for his family. I could never find anything to eat at home and I was alone all the time by myself after school. So one day, as I was looking through some drawers out of boredom and hunger, I found a stack of cash. The thought that came to my mind was, well, look here, looks like someone left this here for me. I'm sure they wouldn't mind if I take some of it. So every day on my way to school, I took a bill or two and stopped at the bodega across the street to buy their finest chocolate bar. It was the only thing I would buy. I don't know why. Although I remember one time my brother telling me about my mother's brother who had come back to visit from Germany. He immigrated to Germany years before, and whenever he came back to visit, he brought a lot of chocolate for his nieces and nephews. I was always waiting for mine, but it never came, so I'd found another way to receive my share of the chocolate. And everything was going well until one day there seemed to be a huge commotion in our house. There seemed to be some money missing. And my father came and asked me if I took the money. Now, I really don't remember if I told him the truth or not, but the next thing I do remember is my father holding me down and beating me. But my brand new stepmother wanted a different type of punishment for me. She came out of the gate and out of the kitchen with the heated spoon that she had been heating on the stovetop and told my father to burn my back with it. My father was shocked and hesitated at first, but then she told him that he had to do it for me to stop stealing. My father did it. I'd never experienced such pain. The pain was deep and I could smell my own skin burning. The smell changed as it got to the flesh. She went back to the kitchen and came back with another heated spoon. My father hesitated again, but due to her persistence, he did it again and again and again until he finally threw the spoon across the room and said, "That's enough, and let me go." I could hardly walk. The next day, I couldn't sit on the chair in the classroom. My back was attached to my clothes. The teacher noticed that I was uncomfortable sitting on the chair and took me outside of the classroom. She asked me until I told her what had happened. She took a look at my back and took me to the principal's office. Together, they called my home, and my stepmother answered and told them that it was a family matter and that you should mind your goddamn business. After that, my stepmother stepped up her game of torture. No food and no peace. I mean, she never gave me food, and she would wake me up in the middle of the night and take me to the backyard and leave me there. Remind you, this is in the middle of the winter, and it's icy snow outside, and it's pitch black, and I don't even have shoes on. Later on, I thought that if the CIA have made one mistake was the fact that they didn't hire her as a torture operative. I promise you she was the best. One time after not eating anything for a few days, and I was so hungry that I begged her for food, and I told her that I would do anything for her to stop what she was doing. This time she actually stopped and said, "Okay." Then she went to the kitchen and came back with something in her hand. She told me to close my eyes and open my mouth. I closed my eyes and opened my mouth. Then she put something in my mouth. I started chewing, and it took me a few seconds to realize that what she put in my mouth isn't food. The taste was a combination of dirt, salt, and pepper. There was actually gravel grinding under my teeth. I was so hungry that I actually considered swallowing, but I couldn't down it, so I spit it out of my hand, and I was right. I looked up, and she had this grin on her face. I asked her again, "What can I do for you to stop this?" She said, "You really want this to stop?" I nodded. She said, "Go out there in the street and jump in front of a car. If you do this, it will all stop." I was furious. There was no solution here. She wanted me gone. My brother was okay for the most part at the time. Later on, I learned that her plan was to get rid of the younger kid first, and the older one was going to be a piece of cake. My elder brother Ben overdosed on heroin a few years later, I heard. That day, I ran outside and towards the passing cars on the street. I ran towards the cars, and right before I got to the boulevard, I had the thought, why should I listen to her? I couldn't find the reason. I thought about telling my father, but I realized he already knew what was happening and didn't want to know anymore. He wanted it to stop just as bad as I did, perhaps. I knew I was on my own. My best friend became the neighborhood gangster, aka Mike Tyson. He gave me my first knife so I can protect myself on the streets. I was 7. Before all of this, I remember my father taking me to a class other than school one day. On the way there, he says, "Son, I'm a Baha'i and I'm taking you to Baha'is children classes. Baha'is believe in the unity of humanity and oneness of God, but we're not accepting this society and we can't tell anyone about it." I went to those classes by myself every chance I got after that. A year later, we moved to a new area in Tehran, to an apartment complex, and I was completely out of my father's house and on my own by this point. My place of sleep was the building's stairways. I was a king of stairways. I had to listen if someone came from above or below, and I would very quietly go the opposite way to hide all our neighbors and friends. I couldn't let anyone know, but everyone knew. Everyone knew from all those times I've been knocking on her door and begging my stepmother to open the door and her not opening the door. I actually remember neighbors opening their doors to see what's going on, at which time I was very much ashamed, and they would close their doors and go back inside. After a while, I would stop and go away. That first summer, I thought, well, people sleep on the grass all the time. I think I'm just going to sleep in the park at night. I was so tired of walking the streets that day. I went to the park and slept on the grass. In the middle of the night, I felt something behind me. I opened my eyes and realized there was a grown man sleeping behind me and grabbing me. The shock was so strong that I jumped up to my feet and started to run as fast as I could while yelling, "I'll tell my father, I'll tell my father." I'd never been so scared and never slept in the park again. Stairways became my home. Winters were the worst. Many times I thought I'd freeze to death and actually hoped that would happen. It didn't, because I would have to wake up from the cold and start moving around. I had zero peaceful night of rest growing up, and no one would take me in because my father was a Baha'i. I remember one time me and my father were passing each other in the hallway, and after not seeing each other for months, he stopped and said, "Where the hell have you been?" I looked at him and I said, "Who are you?" "My father." "I'm your father." I said to him, "Where have you been?" What kind of a father are you not to know where your son's been? We both sat in that hallway with our backs against the wall. I took a few moments and said, "You're right. I don't know what to do. I have 2 young boys with this woman now, and I don't want them to end up without a mother like you and your brother." I understood what he was saying as if I was my father's friend. I told him that I understood and that I was going to stay on the streets so that his other sons can have a family. It wasn't like I had a choice, and that wasn't the end of my father's problems. My stepmother wanted him to sign the house over to her, and she would start a fight over this every single day. My father was afraid that if he signed the house over to her, she would kick him out too. Then my father started developing MS. He started getting paralyzed on one side of his body, and I often went home just so I can give him a shower and a shave, at which time my stepmother would come home and kick me out again. It got worse over time. There's no cure for MS. And the medication suggested by the doctors needed to be bought from the black market. I was already living in the streets. I would go after these medications whenever needed, and I would do anything to get them. But they were of no use. My only getaway was to go to the movies, though. I always snuck in, but I couldn't get too lost in the film because, perverts are everywhere. Perverts go to the movies, so I was always ready to run or hide from them. I loved watching the action films, though. Bruce Lee. Ooh, Jackie Chan. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Albie Buck. Rambo was definitely my favorite. And there's nothing back here, there's nothing. These were the heroes in the movies. My life was real. I skipped school most days just so I could find the means to feed myself. Me and 2 other kids that lived in the streets did what we had to do to survive. I tried working a job at a cabinet factory, but the owner was an opium addict who never paid me. He always told me he would pay me next week. Next week never came. I tried to keep up with the children classes. I taught morality, oneness, and unity. This was the only pure thing for me living in the streets. When I went to the classes at people's homes, all the other kids looked nice and clean. I was always so self-conscious of the way I must have looked or even smelled to them, but I still went. No one asked me how I was. I didn't tell them either. After a few years of living in the streets, and I was in 9th grade, and I couldn't wait to graduate from high school so I can get a real job, until a teacher found out that I wasn't a Muslim and didn't allow me to take the final exam that year. When I asked him how I could graduate otherwise, he said that the only other way for me was to convert, or he would notify the religious police. Can you believe that? That's just so ridiculous. What the hell is a religious police? But yes, unfortunately, they do exist. So I told the teacher to hold that thought while I went out to think about it real quick. But what I was really thinking was, I have nothing else left in this country and nowhere to go. I need to get the hell out of here. I left school that day and called my best friend. He was a 50-year-old gangster who had continuously suggested I should join his crew for big jobs. I didn't want to go that route. My stepmother had told me that I would end up an addict, dead, or in jail, and I didn't want her wishes to come true. He gave me a number to smuggler down south who could take me across the border. I'd save up some money for a rainy day. And it was pouring. I went down south. I met the smuggler with another guy who wanted to cross the border as well. The other guy didn't have enough money with him, so I ended up paying for half of his fee too, which left me completely empty. I arrived in a new country with no money. I spent 2 years working as a pool shark, getting in a fight with the neighborhood gangster named Fire, who became good friends after I confronted him for robbing and regularly extorting my best friend, which led to my friend leaving that city. I almost got killed by him and his goons, but there was a miracle. He liked the fact that I was willing to die for my friend. I also got sick and nearly died then and couldn't get a friend or a family member to help. One of my friends hung himself from a ceiling fan, and most of my other friends became full-fledged addicts. I knew if I touched this stuff there was no going back. The shit was everywhere. 2 years of this. And I finally came to the US as a refugee not long after 9/11 happened. I was working at a grocery store and my managers and co-workers started calling me Bin Laden. They thought he was funny. I thought they were retarded. We got along just fine. I started getting harassed by a cop who would literally park outside of my place and wait for me to drive so he could pull me over. I had some violations like speeding and stuff, mostly because I had 3 jobs and I was always rushing to get to work. My license was also expired and I couldn't get the proper documentation to renew my license because I was still under FBI investigation after 9/11 for whatever reason. I'm not even Muslim. On top of all of that, I just heard that my father had passed away a few months prior and I didn't even know about it. Didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to my old man, so I really didn't have anything to lose. One day I was sitting parked outside of my place and talking to my then girlfriend in the car when the cop turned on his lights. I knew this guy was on me, so I told a friend of mine about the guy and the fact that my license was expired. My friend suggested, you know what? Why don't you use my ID? My brother uses it all the time and white guys think we all look alike, so I took my friend's ID, and when the cop came to my window and asked for my license and registration, I gave him my friend's ID. He went and came back and asked me to step out of the car. I asked why, and he said that my license was suspended. I thought, what? My friend's license is suspended? Why the hell would he give it to me then? Anyway, I got booked under my friend's name. When the cop took me to the magistrate said, when are you going to move out of this county? I said, I live here, sir. He said, you move or we going to make you move. Then he booked me and said to go to court on Monday. It was Friday night. I put bail and went to talk to a lawyer. As soon as I got out, the lawyer suggested that I should close that case immediately. And I might have to run for a year if they found out about the identity issue. He said that the warrants would expire after a year. He did seem pretty nervous on a court day though, much more nervous than I was. Later on, I found out why. He had lied to me. He charged me a hefty sum to deal with that particular case and leave me with the mess I was in. A week later, the cop accidentally found out that I'd used my friend's ID and called me. I knew I had to get out of Dodge. I quit my jobs and went underground. I learned construction, created my own company, and started saving money to deal with my legal issues. Right around this time, I also started to think about what it was I wanted to do with my life. I remembered back when I was a kid that I wanted to be an actor. But I gave up the idea because Baha'is don't have any rights in Iran and acting and entertainment are definitely out of order. So I decided to take classes at the Washington, D.C. Theater Lab. I then went back to court and paid the price for using my friend's ID. The cop made sure of it. I also started taking classes in New York City. I went back and forth between DC and New York for auditions and classes so many times. I hated the Greyhound buses, hated the smell of it. I needed to make a decision to stay in DC and live my life with my then fiance, or move to New York City and follow my dream. My fiance didn't want to have anything to do with that life, so I moved to New York City by myself. I wanted to study with the great Stella Adler. After all, she was a teacher of Marlon Brando and Robert De Niro, two of my favorite actors. I went to her studio that first day and I asked to register for her classes. A man came and said that it could certainly help me register. I told him that I needed to make sure that I'm in Stella's class. He said all the teachers are taught their method as if I was studying with her. I told him that I understood, but I needed to be in Stella's class. He then said, I don't know how to tell you this, kid, but Stella has been dead a long time. I'm happy to register you though. By this time, I was out in the street. It was like someone had just crushed my hopes and dreams. I stopped pursuing acting for months after, until I found another teacher who was the closest thing to Stella as I could find. Stella! Stella! I got an agent and started going to auditions now. This was over 12 years ago. I won't bore you with the politics of this business like any other business, but I can tell you that it's not easy, especially for an ethnic actor. Now, I became an actor to learn about who I am, to learn about who you are, to learn about who we are and tell our stories. I don't know who I am. I'm a kid, I'm a survivor, I'm a caregiver, I'm a homeless, I'm nothing. I'm everything. I'm an actor. And for as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be an actor. And watching guys like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. You talking to me? You talking to me? You talking to me? Who the hell are you talking to? You talking to me? Or Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You're not going to say that now. You're not going to say that now. You're going to pull this head out shit on me right now. What that television set turned on right now. Or Denzel Washington in Training Day. You think you can do this to me? I run shit here. You just live here. That's right. You better walk away because I'm going to burn this motherfucker down. Inspired me to want to become an actor.